Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. And yes, today it's finally time. The NDA has been lifted. We can finally talk about Sandy Bridge E, the X79 chipset, socket 2011. I'm allowed to say all these things without getting told off. Oh, it's brilliant. But, right, for those of you that don't know, what about it? Right, socket 2011. Whole new socket, new CPU size, everything. Not backwards compatible with everything. There's been a lot of confusion out there. People saying, "Oh, I'm going to, buy a X79 board for my 2500K or something, or I'm going to be putting my 990X in my 2011 board." Well, I'm afraid you're not. That's just not going to happen. The only similarities is the spacing for the your CPU coolers is the same as 1366, but just to make things confusing, you can't use your old 1366 cooler without some adapters now, because the mount is slightly different in that where you would normally push your CPU heatsink through, they've extended the CPU, not socket, but the retaining bracket out, and it's actually got threads on it. So you have to kind of like screw your heatsink actually into the retaining bracket now. Like I said, it's confusing because it's still 1366 spacing, but it's not anymore. So for argument's sake, like with the Nocturne HD14 that I'm using, they've brought out an adapter kit for it already, and then it all fits lovely. In fact, to be perfectly honest with you, it probably fits a bit better. It's actually easier to work with, because where you now don't have to bugger about around the back of the motherboard, you can just do it all on the top. Like I said, it's kind of made things a bit easier for us. Asus have done something slightly different with theirs, where you can take that kind of like threaded bit off, but I've not seen it on any other board yet, so we'll forget that. But anyway, so other differences, quad channel memory. A lot of people have said, why have they put the RAM on both sides? Well, they've brought quad channel memory in so that you've got the ability to run more memory. That's it, basically. Yeah, okay, with quad channel memory, do you know what I mean? There's more channels and stuff. People were like, why isn't it triple channel anymore? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Like I said, more memory is one of them, but also by putting 4 DIMMs on either side, they've kept all of the lanes or pipelines, whatever you want to call it, but they've kept all the memory pipelines the same length. So it keeps the latency down. So it actually improves performance. That's the reason why they're either side of the socket now. But yeah, the basic reason why there's more DIMM slots is effectively so that you've got the ability to run more memory. And a lot of people have said, what's the maximum memory available? Well, because of 8GB sticks now, you do have the ability of running 64GB of memory, and that is supported. Another thing, memory, it says that it supports 1600 out the box, and it does. But to be perfectly honest with you, the memory multipliers are on the boards for you to be able to run 1866, 2133 and beyond. I've seen the notches go up to like 3000 on some of the base clock tie-ins or the CPU straps, which I'll come to when we get to the BIOS a bit later on. But obviously, we're going to be taking a look at the 3960X, which at the time of the video being released was the absolute top of the hilt of the Sandy Bridge Extreme processors. It's got 6 cores, 12 threads, so it's a bit of a monster. Everyone's going to be kind of thinking like 990X was that before, but this one is slightly different, because the best way I can explain it is it's like a 2600K with 2 more cores. It's a 6-core processor right out the box, 6 independent processors as well, none of this module malarkey that other brands have done, and it's an absolute corker. Now, something I do know, which not a lot of people out there, I've not been told not to tell you, so I'm just going to go with it anyway. Technically, the processor does have 8 cores inside. There's a bit of a bombshell for you. There are 8 cores in it already. And basically what Intel have done, it's all to do with the way that they structure their business, in the sense that everything gets speed binned. It's like your 2500K and your 2600K underneath are exactly the same. They just turn bits off. And with the 3960X, it's actually got 2 cores fused off and not so much cache enabled. Now, a lot of you would think, why would they want to do that? Well, because of the engineering process where it's so small and fine and everything, something doesn't quite work properly, they turn it off and then bin it. And by bin it, I mean put it in a different bin. So that, for argument's sake, the 2500K, maybe the hyper-threading didn't work properly on those, or you may get one that's, you know, that you're lucky that where it was just all right and they just didn't have enough. But essentially what they do is they test them, see which ones are best, and then they get separated out, and then basically the ones that are the absolute cream of the crops go one way and the ones that go another way. So you're all going to be thinking to yourself, why have they got 8 cores? Well, there will be a Xeon coming later on which will have 8 cores. Now, I've not been told not to say that either, but yeah, there is an 8-core Xeon going to be available. But the thing with the Xeon is it's not really going to overclock. So you've got that kind of, they have to balance it all out. But a lot of you are now going to be going, oh, so when are we going to be getting octo cores for the mainstream? Well, I can kind of tell you that you're not going to be getting it for a good while yet. Don't be thinking Ivy Bridge, not going to happen. You're not even, no, I can't even talk about that. But it's a long way off, a long way off. So what we need to concentrate on is the fact that 6-core now. Now, we do need to do the tests. We do need to go through a lot of it because otherwise I'm going to end up doing half of my conclusion at the beginning. But essentially, I hope I'm covering kind of the basics because there's not, to be perfectly honest with you, there's not really a massive amount other than I can talk about the old kind, or the turbo, and the fact that it has got a turbo mode on it, and the turbo will go up to 3.9 gigahertz if it's really stressed out. But that again is all something that you can edit and change in the BIOS, because this is what Sandy Bridge is about. It's having a little bit more of a play. It's for someone that's got a little bit more noggin about them and they're looking for the best, basically. But what we're going to do is we'll go on to do all the testing and stuff. Now, there's no games in this because this is all about the processor and not so much the graphics card. But we'll go and do all the benchmarks and stuff, and then we'll get to the end. And we'll talk about it all in the conclusion. So, I've just seen the time as well. I've already been talking for 7 minutes. So, we best get on with some testing. Right then, guys. We'll have another quick look at the board. I'll start at the top. Don't forget you can pause at any moment. Although I don't normally cover the Intel boards very much, because I generally just use these for my stock testing, and then we base all the other motherboards on it. But this motherboard is actually quite a grower in the fact that, yeah, there's a lot about it I don't like. The design is a bit pants. But there's things on it like the skull area. It's going to be a Marmite. You'll either love it or you'll hate it. But with the mesh and the skull and stuff, it shows that they are, you know, even remotely, they are worried about the aesthetics. But then there's lots of other things on it where it does just look like it's just sticking stuff anywhere. But technically all the lanes are wired as 16 times, although that we do know that you can only technically use 2 cards and run them both at 16 times. But there are a lot of things on this that I do quite like the BIOS switch at the back. This BIOS switch, which I'll show you in a bit anyway, when you flick that switch, it turns on, this will light up red. And then the next time you post, it just takes you to the BIOS. So if you get a BIOS hang, so it's just looping, won't post properly, switch the system off, switch the button on, switch the system back on again, and it will go to the BIOS. Not at reset settings, but at the settings that you were trying to boot at before. So that you can go in there, see the settings that aren't working, make some changes. Basically, then you turn the BIOS switch off again, reset the system, and if you've got the settings better that time, it will post. Now, this may only be a really small thing, but to be perfectly honest with you, I wish other motherboard manufacturers would adopt this, because a lot of people, it will go in there or it'll be booting at, like, it'll go back to stock settings. But this simple thing where you just flick a button and it just takes you to the BIOS without any messing about is absolutely chuffing brilliant. It's, like I said, it's only a small thing, but I love it. Really, really do. Something I don't love is the bleeper or the speaker, whatever you want to call it, on board. That does drive me nuts. But anyway, all in all though, it's a pretty damn good looking board. Just going to stick some memory in it and show you it with the G-Skill in. Right then guys, just thought I'd give you a quick look at the board with some memory in it. This is a G-Skill kit. It's 2133 rated at 1.65 volts. If I have a look here, can we see it together? Not with my crappy camera work. But it's 9, 11, 10, 28 at 1.65 volts for 2133. And I think you'll agree with me that the black modules on this blue and black board do work really well. That's 16GB by the way, 4 sticks. Lovely jubbly. Right then, must be time to get this thing naked. There's the back of the heatsink area. This bit really doesn't even touch anything. You can see the copper area there for the chipset contact. And there was nothing on the bottom that's covering up the wind bond chip, but the heat pipe does go down there. We'll get rid of that. And then we'll take off the power regs heatsink as well. There we go, you can get your first look of the naked X79 chipset. Don't forget you can pause at any moment during this video should you want to take in a little bit more. I think this is where the end of the heat pipe stops, is above the wind bond chip. We'll have a look at the power regs for the CPU. That's what the secondary heatsink was covering. But finally, we can now show you, or I could do if I can get it undone. There we go. 2-stage. See, this is the first time I've done this, so I don't know. So we'll do this again. Undo this one. Undo this one. It's a double clamp. There's the CPU. We'll take this out now. And there you go, that's your first look at the 2011 socket. Or rather our first look together, because I've not been able to show you this before. There's the CPU itself. Have a look at that. Right then guys, this is an 1155 CPU, this is a 1366 CPU, and this is a 2011 CPU. Now you can see the sizes do gradually go up, obviously because of the different socket sizes. Something that is quite interesting, if you turn the 2011 CPU round, it is actually very similar sized to the 1366. Obviously if you turn it back around that way, it's not, but it's just worth noting that the 2011 is kind of rectangle rather than being square like the other two. So you can see there's quite a difference in sizes there. Obviously with the 1155s you can get dual cores and quad cores. The top of the range one goes up to 2600K or the 2700K, but either way they're 4 cores with 4 threads, 4 extra, sorry. We will start again. 4 cores, 8 threads, so you get 8 threads altogether. This 6 cores, 12 threads maximum, but they do quad cores in this as well. The 2011 processor, there are technically, for the mainstream, 6 cores and 12 threads as well, but there are Xeons with 8 cores and 16 threads. Something that I've heard from Intel as well is that all of these processors that are released at the moment do have 8 cores and 16 threads, but 2 of the cores are actually fused off. Something to do with overclocking and stuff like that, but the ones where all the cores work perfectly, it's all to do with speed binning, but the ones where all the cores work perfectly, they go on to the Xeons. But with the Xeons, they're not really designed to overclock. All the ones that overclock really well end up becoming the extreme 6-core processors. It's pretty much what many CPUs are like. They actually get binned, and it's to stop waste basically. So if there's something slightly wrong with one of them and it doesn't pass the tests, they pretty much turn it off and it becomes a lower CPU. That's just the way it works. But yeah, that's a little bit of information for you. Pretty much all of the 2011 Extreme CPUs will actually have 8 cores inside them. You just can only use 6. How about that one? Okay guys, so I just wanted to show you something. Now with the Intel board, the BIOS isn't the best in the world, but you'll pretty much be able to get the idea. Pretty much the BIOS is exactly the same as what you would expect with the ordinary Sandy Bridge. You've got the ability to do the turbo and have the turbo set to a certain speed. As we can kind of have a look here, and you can set the each one of the cores for different turbo speed should you want. You can set the override for the amps and the watts and that kind of thing, and obviously each board's going to be different, but as far as those kind of things are concerned, everything's going to be the same as Sandy Bridge. Generally what we normally do with a lot of these is we turn the speed step off, we would turn like the C1E off and everything like that, the EIST, and then set the core speed with the multiplier, so that you get a static clock. A lot of people do still like, for power saving, for the speed step to still be on so it runs lower when it's not needed, but for a lot of us we just set it so that it's a stable manual clock. But the thing that's different with Sandy Bridge E is what it's called here is the host clock multiplier. But essentially what you can do, whereas with Sandy Bridge you didn't really get any base clock options, with this you have. So you basically go that, and you can see the processor base clock there as 125, because I've put it up to the multiplier to 1.25. So it's basically a base clock change. But one thing that I need to do is I'm just going to change it back quickly, just so I can show you something. If you have a look down here, you can see that the memory is DDR3 1600. If I change it up to 125, you can see that it's now just changed to 2000. Now that's because, as like with X58, if you change the base clock, the strap that connects the base clock to the memory changes as well. So if I change it up again, the RAM speed is going to change again. So now we've gone up to 266. So if I wanted to turn the RAM down, for example, I then need to go into memory, and I'd need to change it, and you can see the options that we've got here to be able to step it back down again. Now obviously my processor won't do a 166 base clock, so if I go back up, change it, 125, we go down to the memory overrides and look at our options for memory. So we've got 1333, 1666, 2000 and 2333. Obviously you can go up even further if your memory is capable of it. But that's something that you do need to bear in mind. Each time you change the base clock up a little bit, because on the other boards that you do, you will be able to change it by 1 notch increment. So you'll be able to do it, like by 0.01, 0.1, or even a whole base clock notch at a time, and then just keep going up if you want. I know my processor's capable of 130 base clock is about an absolute maximum with a low multiplier. But when you do this, make sure that you keep an eye on this. This is a lot simpler than X58 used to be, because we've not really got that much that we can change with the base clock, but it kind of brings back that extra kind of level that you have to keep an eye on to be able to go in there. So not only now can you do just a multiplier overclock, you can now do the base clock as well, because something else I want to show you just quickly. I'm going to stick it back down to 1. You can see that the core speed is 3.9 gigahertz with the turbo. But if I turn it up to 125, that instantly then jumps to 4.88. So there's a lot of things that you kind of have to keep in mind. So it's a lot more in depth. Not as in depth, I have to admit, as I would personally have preferred. I'd like it to have been a heck of a lot more in depth than this, more base clock tweaking and stuff like that. But that's just because the architecture has changed. It's just the way it is, because at the end of the day, this is Sandy Bridge. So even being able to turn it up to 125 is 20 notches on the base clock more than we ever used to be able to do with the original Sandy Bridge. And obviously we're dealing with a lot higher multipliers than we used to be dealing with than X58, for example, because, you know, 22, 23 was about the most that you'd get with a decent base clock. Obviously there was the noobs out there that left the base clock low and just turned the multiplier up, but I mean, that's the way it is with this now, because they've engineered the architecture to work better with it. But so that's something you need to keep in mind. Go and have a look at my Asus Rampage review, because I'm going into a lot more depth about the BIOS and the changes and everything that you can do in there. But yeah, I suppose that's about all I can show you really, because we're not reviewing the motherboard, because the BIOS is basic with the Intel board. There's not a massive amount of tweaking that you can do there. So yeah, I guess we should leave it here. So 3D Mark 11 P-score. Don't forget this is with a stock 570 and the CPU at stock as well, just with all the speed step, all that kind of stuff just left on as it would be straight out the box. We get a P-score of 5,942. I'm going to quickly run the extreme score for you now, and we'll be back with that very shortly. So then, swiftly on to 3D Mark 11, and we're scoring 1857 or 1,857 points on that. Graphics score was 1656, physics score was 11,825, and the combined score was 2,138. So yeah, some pretty good scores there. Now it's time to move on quickly, and I'm going to do Cinebench. In fact, I'll do Cinebench in front of you guys right now. Move the camera out and you can watch this one, because it's quite a nice graphical one to be able to watch. So we open Cinebench, and we'll just do the CPU. You can see it live rendering. Now pretty much Cinebench, you can download this because it's free, but it's a good judge of how your computer is going to work with 3D applications, rendering, video rendering, sort of cinema 3D, 4D rather, that kind of thing. Anything that really does stress the CPU. And there we go, 10.39 points. Don't forget that's stock, straight out the box, no BIOS tweaks or anything like that. No messing around with the turbos or anything. That's even at stock, that's a massive speed. What I'm going to do quickly is, in fact, I'll cut the camera off and then we'll come back and we'll do W prime. Right peeps, W prime results. You may want to wipe your eyes, because yes, they are correct. And yes, the CPU is at stock, but 32M results. were 5.568 seconds, and the 124 million results are 160.696 seconds. Yes, it really is that quick, straight out of the box. Absolutely mental. Anyway, what I'm going to do quickly now is we'll do a Heaven result quickly, and then we'll do some folding at home as well. Right then, Heaven benchmark finished. You can see all the settings there. Obviously, if you need to see the smaller text, just make it bigger on your screen, go full screen. You should be able to see it fine because it's being recorded in 1080. But frames per second 46, score was 1159, minimum frames per second was 26.1 and max was 106.2. This, just to let you know, was Heaven opened and run, no changes made whatsoever, so it's just a straight out the box benchmark with obviously the resolution set in 1920 by 1080. So, like I said, again, for a basic score, pretty damn good. Right then guys, folding at home results. We've used the SMP client for this, but we're using folding at home GPU tracker V2. This does all the CPU and everything all in one. Obviously you can see my name here because this is my name for the work unit that we're working on. The team number, this is the Overclock 3D team number, 98860. It's a red line at Overclock 3D, folding at home. Yeah, we've got an awesome group of people on the forums that are doing all the folding, obviously for an amazing cause. If you want any more details, I'm going to put the link underneath the video. But anyway, 6900 project. The project is worth 7,164 points. And if it was doing this work unit all day, you know, continuously doing one after another, it would get 48,192.1. So it's a 48,000 ppd CPU with this work unit, which is pretty damn good. Right then peeps, on to PC Mark 7. We had a total score of 3,338. If you look down through, you can see that the PC Mark score was obviously 3338. Lightweight score was 2488, productivity was 2175, creativity was 3658, computation score was 5518, entertainment is 4404, and the system storage score is 1821. Again, a pretty decent score. Pretty decent, it's pretty amazing really for PC Mark 7. So yeah, that's that over and done with. Right then peeps, on to PC Mark Vantage. We had a PC Mark score of 10,114. That was 7996 for the memories, 6562 for TV and movies, 11852 for gaming, 6319 for music, communications was 13774, productivity was 8516, and hard drive was 4191. So again, some pretty monstrous scores there. I think we've pretty much done all of the benchmarks that we really can do, other than like the gaming ones, but then the gaming ones are really going to be heavily linked to the graphics card. But I think really now it would be time to move on. Right then guys, 3960X conclusion. As I always do, tell you the award, explain why, and there's nothing else that I can give it apart from a gold. It's an absolute no-brainer. But I want to talk to you about the kind of what I thought about it and everything like that, as I always do, because I don't want to make it simple like a lot of the other reviews out there that make videos. I like to kind of tell you my experiences and stuff, because I think that's my style. I like to kind of pass, you know, try and get as much across as I possibly can. Now, it is absolutely bonkers nuts, and I mean bonkers nuts. You need to go and see the Rampage video to be able to see what this overclock's like, because the reason why I didn't overclock it for this or the actual like main review is because with the original Sandy, the Intel boards aren't really that good. And I mean that in a way that with the Sandy Bridge processors I got sent at launch for the original Sandy, I was putting a lot more volts through them on the Intel board, but then the second I put them into a decent motherboard, like from Asus or Gigabyte, the volts were way down. And I don't want to absolutely fry to death the processor. But like I'm doing this video, the conclusion after doing all of my other board testing, and the processor is nuts. What I would say is for overclocking, give yourself an absolute max limit of 1.4 for air, but make sure you've got an absolutely awesome processor, because these do get warm. Now, there's some of you out there going to understand that it's a 2600K with a couple of extra cores on it, so you're going to be getting like almost 50% more heat. And then there's other of you out there that are going to be going, oh, my AMD doesn't get very warm. Well, that's because your AMD doesn't read the temperatures properly. And if you actually go and look at the temperatures that Bulldozer puts out, if you think that 70 degrees and a red hot heatsink is a proper temperature, you are sadly mistaken. With this, yes, it does get warm. I've seen 80 degrees, but then I was using fairly high volts on when I was doing the overclocking on the other board. But it does go up, and I've got to admit, everything about it feels like Sandy Bridge. I know it's Sandy Bridge Extreme, but the way it overclocks feels the same. The way it stalls on the Windows Start screen feels the same. Some of the times when I've not been getting the settings correct, and like even the multiplier dropping, just screamed the early days when I originally got the first Sandy Bridge. But this, it just carries so much performance. For those of you out there that are going to be thinking about using it for like video renders or like animations or sort of like cinema 4D renders and stuff like that, so really in-depth CPU intensive stuff, it's absolutely nuts. 10.39 out the box stock, right? I can say now, it's in the other review, but Cinebench, it will do 13.9 overclocked. It's an absolute bonkers chip. Some of the things were a bit up and down with some of the other ones, and if you were an AMD fanboy, you'd be screaming to yourself now that either Windows wasn't, do you know what I mean, optimized for all these cores, or that it's early and there's all BIOS and stuff. And yeah, you're right, it may, do you know what I mean, things may get better with different BIOSes and different drivers, as they always do. But this actually bloody works. And I mean, it works, it's just freaking nuts. Some of the things that we were expecting, like some of the memory bandwidth. When we first got Sandy, memory bandwidth was just nuts. It was like, oh my God, where did these scores come from? And we kind of expected at least on par with these, but in some of the places they're a little bit less. This could be though, and I'm going to sound like the old AMD boys did, this could be kind of older programs, because some of the programs haven't been updated for this yet. And it was one of the things I was talking to the guys IDA, and they were like, they may actually need to make a few tweaks for their results to kind of work better with Sandy Bridge E. But like the Sandra results and stuff, they were just nuts, absolutely and I keep wanting to say the F word, but they were just crackers. With some of the like 3D benchmarks, in that I mean like 3D Mark Vantage and 3D Mark 11, it obviously did make a noticeable difference. The PhysX bit on 11, where it offloads the PhysX onto the CPU, especially in performance, you know, sometimes it's a bit stuttery and it kind of moves slowly and stuff like that. With this, it just literally, everything fell apart. It's so quick, it was unreal. I don't want to keep going round and round and round in circles, but it is nuts. Is it worth the money? The Intel top range processor is always, you know what I mean, eye-wateringly priced. I mean, if it hadn't have been kind of around the £1,000 mark in the UK, I've heard it's going to be about $1,200, $1,300 in the US. If it hadn't been that price, then I would have been worried, to be perfectly honest with you. And I mean, I would have been worried that, you know, isn't not going to be that good. But it is crackers, and it puts a nice threshold there. This is like Intel going, we can do this if we want to, kind of shrugging themselves off. If you want it, you've got to pay for it. If you don't, there's plenty of other amazing processors out there. And let's face it, if you're going to be spending this kind of money on Sandy E, then you really are going to be wanting the utmost performance, because the 2600K is still an amazing processor. AMD can't make anything that get anywhere close to it. So just making Sandy Bridge E just takes the piss that little bit more. It's just like I said, it's like them going, yep, this is what we can do. What are you going to do about it? And if we're perfectly honest with ourselves, guys, you do kind of need to give Intel a bit of respect for this kind of thing, because let's face it, they don't need to do this. They're doing it just to kind of keep themselves advancing, because I've already told you that they've already got a processor out there that beats every other processor on the planet, but they've gone that step further again and beaten themselves. I honestly do wish there was more competition out there, because I think we'd have even better products. But a big thumbs up to Intel for doing this in the first place, and it is nuts. I've got to admit, the sample that I've got didn't overclock as well as I was expecting, but then again, I've not gone crazy with the volts this time, and I have heard that there are some amazing other processors out there that have gone to like different websites and with vendors and stuff like that. There are just some bonkers ones up there. I sadly didn't get mine over 5, but I can say now that I've seen them well over 5 with decent volts, and I think it was the Silicon Lottery. I've just not won it this time, in the fact that I have seen a 3960X at 5 gigahertz dead at 1.37, say 1.38 volts, 100% stable. Now that'll be, like I said, it's about the Silicon Lottery again. Some people are going to get lucky, some people aren't. But even at 4.7 gig, the performance out of this thing is just absolutely freaking nuts. Out the box, it's amazing. Do you know what I mean? Even a standard processor. But like I said, it is worth bearing in mind, when overclocked, putting those volts through it, putting the core speed up, they do get warm. But like I've kind of tried to explain, we were kind of expecting them to be warm anyway. There was no way this was going to be sitting there at 4.5 gigahertz, 4.5 gigahertz at like 60 degrees. It just wasn't going to happen with 6 cores all hammered in there, 6 active cores all hammered in there. So yeah, the long and short of it is, it's nuts, absolutely nuts. I love it. It's amazing. The performance is absolutely mind-blowing, and this is just the first that we've heard from them. Are they going to be bringing new ones out? Are they going to be bringing different revisions out? Do you know what I mean? Things that are, you know, are they going to evolve? We don't know. I certainly hope so, because this is just freaking bonkers. What we've also got to bear in mind as well is that there are going to be lower down processors coming out as well. So that's also something to keep in mind, and that this isn't going to be, you know, the absolute maximum and that's all we're going to be getting. So all I can say, boys and girls, is it's absolutely chuffing nuts. Hopefully over the course of the video I've covered everything. Please check the other videos. Remember to subscribe and comment and favourite and like and all that kind of stuff for me as well, because obviously every time you do find that button, it does mean a lot to me. Yeah, even the people, no, I'm not going to go down that route, but anyway, absolutely amazing, loved it. And yeah, it's been hard work, because we've been trying to get a lot done in a very short space amount of time, but it's absolutely blinding. And I would have thought you're going to be seeing a hell of a lot of Sandy Bridge E coming out of this channel over the coming months, so make sure you keep an eye. But for now, at least, this is Tiny Tom Logan finally being able to talk to you about Sandy Bridge E, the 3960X, 2011 socket, X79, all of that out.